Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here on this Dev2Dev session. I'm Bram, and I'm here with Maxime, and we're both developers here at Flexso Digital. And so this is a session by developers for developers. And over the next 45 minutes, we want to talk about something that's really changed the way we work here at Flexso this past year. So vibe coding and AI-infused development in SAP. And we put vibe coding there on purpose because that's exactly also the term we want to frame a bit more and push back on. So quick look at what we're gonna see today. First, we're gonna frame a bit what it is, and just importantly, what it isn't. Then the SAP landscape today, what tooling we have available as an SAP developer. And then we're going to show you two concepts we've implemented here at Flexso in our daily workflow. And we're going to show them both as well, the showroom model and Spexo. And then we're going to wrap things up, tell you about what AI still can't do and what the next steps are. So first, framing. What is AI-infused development here in the SAP world? So AI is just taking its baby steps, and we're inventing all these new words and terms and concepts as we're discovering them. And sometimes it can cause a bit of confusion or misunderstanding. And so let's start with the buzzword everybody is talking about, vibe coding. So the term vibe coding, it only is from February of 2025, and it comes from Andrej Karpathy, which is a former Tesla AI lead and OpenAI co-founder. And he put out a post on X talking about a new kind of coding called vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes and forget the code even exists. And so you talk to the AI, you accept the changes, and you don't read any of the code. The post went viral, and everybody was talking about vibe coding like that's the way to work. But he was actually describing just a throwaway thing for in the weekends, projects, prototypes, fun stuff. And he was not describing how you would make a change in a fully S/4HANA system that runs a business. So somewhere along the line, vibe coding got stretched to mean AI does all the development and the humans don't think anymore. And that's exactly what we want to nuance. So what it is not, so it's not, we put in a prompt, we get the code and we ship it. It's also not a replacement for an experienced SAP architect or developer. It's not a magic button that takes over the thinking. And it's also not fully trustworthy, where security, compliance, and performance are really critical. And so here at Flexso, we prefer a broader term called AI-infused development, where AI is a co-pilot across the full development cycle. So dozens of small accelerations, also less repetitive work, and you can focus more on the business value. And so the human stays in the loop, responsible for all the choices and the quality. So I mentioned the whole life cycle. There can be an analysis to sharpen your requirements, structure use cases, explore solution direction. Also in development, to suggest data models, services, generating code fragments, unit testing, and documentation. And then in the finishing phase, the phase we tend to rush a bit more, it helps with refactoring, explaining existing code, test coverage, consistency checks, and preparing handover documentation. So overall, the developer stays responsible for the choices, the architecture, and the final quality. And so why is SAP different from other generic software development? So in training large language models, there was simply not enough public SAP data to fully train on. So we need to give it the proper context ourselves. And so without the context, AI can't produce any helpful output. It'll sound very convincing, but it's mostly not. So a genuinely helpful answer depends on knowing the following things in SAP. So the business objects and data models, the released APIs and integration patterns, authorization and security, extensibility and UI5 guidelines, the clean core principles, and overall performance and compliance. And so SAP is also working on providing more and more support in this regard, and it's launching its new philosophy of the autonomous enterprise. So Joule, which we know as a chatbot, has evolved into a layer across the whole architecture. So it's now become really valuable, embedded into the specific SAP tooling, and is aware of all the technical and functional context which you're working in. And Maxime, I'll let you talk a bit more about this.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, SAP is actively working on a lot of AI solutions today. But what are the available tools right now for an SAP developer the day of today? And we really mean today, because the scene is constantly evolving each day. So first, it wouldn't be an SAP session about developers without still mentioning ABAP as well, because there are really some big changes being made in the ABAP world as of now. So first, we of course already have the Eclipse ABAP development tools, which lets you use the agent in your Eclipse or in your S4 project or ABAP. And what's really important there is that the model really understands the framework nuances because it is trained on existing ABAP code. So it's not just a general LLM which tries to guess what it could be. It's way more nuanced in that way. We also have the ABAP MCP, which normally you would have to, as the AI, it would reduce your output and you would still have to do everything yourself. But with this MCP, it lets the AI create the object for you. So that's already a big step in the agentic side of coding for ABAP. And of course, because it understands the framework nuances, it can also give feedback. So for example, if you want to implement something, the AI will maybe push back and say, you want to do this a custom way, but actually this already exists in this released API. Can't we just use this one instead to keep it as clean core as possible? But the big news in the ABAP world is of course the move to VS Code. So since beginning of this month, we also have the ABAP development tools in VS Code, which is huge because that means that it opens up a lot of options for agentic coding in ABAP. And they're already taking huge steps in this, even though it is brand new. So first, we only had, we could only use it on systems that had single sign-on authentication, which was a huge limiting factor in what systems you could use it on. But in the latest update, they already added basic authentication. So they're really actively working on expanding the whole feature set and possibilities for everyone. We, of course, they also have the MCP server to create the objects for us. And with this move to VS Code, we also have the possibility to create custom agents, which could be a huge move in the autonomous coding with AI. But we're also being honest here, it's still brand new. It's very much new territory. We only just started with it. SAP also just released it this month as a beta. So it's promising, yes, but it's not yet mature enough to really, really use it a lot. But as I've said already, they're really updating it a lot. But of course, we're going to mainly focus on BTP today. So what does BTP look like? Okay, BTP is a platform, and we have some AI implementations there already. For example, the SAP AI Core, which is essentially the runtime for your AI models. Then the generative AI hub, which lets you use these models on the AI Core for use cases. And then, of course, SAP Build, where Joule is tightly integrated into your development process. That is all on BTP, but of course, here Joule is the overarching AI layer. So when you look at it, in reality, we have the foundational layer, so your APIs, your workflows, everything that's on BTP for the clean core implementation. But in reality, we then connect it to our Fiori apps and integrations, our workflows and automations, our skills, our document, everything you want to do on BTP, we can use those foundational layers. And how is that implemented in Joule? Well, there's 3 big steps. We first of all have the skills, so it's specific tasks that Joule can do, which are then bundled in a skill. We then have the agents, which can do multiple of these skills at the same time or like sequential. And then we finally have our assistants, which is more the user-facing side, which then controls the other Joule agents, which then use skills. But of course, that's BTP itself. What do we have for developers? Well, first of all, we have Joule for developers. So if you're using SAP build code on BTP, you will most likely use Joule for developers, as it offers you Joule in your build code environment. But of course, a huge part of developing on BTP is also that we can use VS Code, which we either have the SAP build VS Code extension, or we can use our own AI coding models. And of course, a big part here is that we can use orchestration. Now, orchestration might be a new term to some, so to briefly explain it, is that there's one agent, or however you want to call it, that controls and divides the work between other agents. So think of it like, for example, an orchestra. You have all the different instrument groups, but you have one conductor that says, okay, this needs to be louder or faster, or okay, maybe the trumpets need to do this, the piano this. Think of it in that way. So that's orchestration. And then Bram will talk about how we use it in Flexso to maybe inspire you to start your own AI journey.
Yes. So we've done the theory. Now let's look practical. So we're going to show you two ways in which we incorporate AI in our workflow. We're not going to show you how to build agents and skills. There's plenty of resources online for that, but we're going to show you the application of those agents and skills. And first is the showroom model, which we call. So let me explain first why we build it, because we needed to solve a really real problem we had with client workshops. And so in making mock-ups and prototypes, what we used to do was very static. So after our initial meeting with the client, we worked separately with our heads down, just preparing for 2 weeks with making static Figma screenshots. And then it shows you what it could be, but it didn't actually work properly. And so we flipped it with AI. And so now we went fully interactive. So we have a standard setup before we start that initial meeting, where all our Flexso and Fiori guidelines are embedded in an AI workflow. So now we can spend the meeting time to solve the right problem together with the clients. And at the end, we have a working prototype with all the code we can start building from. And so we've made an agent team, and at the heart, like Maxime already told you, there's an orchestrator. So it runs the whole process. It's much more than just a chatbot which you fire prompts at. It's a coordinator. So it asks you the questions for things that are still missing. It decides which floor plan it fits the problem best, and makes sure everything is built within the SAP and Fiori guidelines. So clean core, extensibility, rules, and UX patterns, it's all baked in. And once it has a clear picture, it starts delegating. And that's our whole team of agents. So we have an architect for the data model, backend developer for the CAP backend, front-end UI5 and Fiori, UX, security, a tester, DevOps, and we can make more as the project needs. And so it gives, the orchestrator gives the right context to each of those agents. And so in practice, we make all those prototypes using VS Code, and we use Claude Code. And we start with the command /showroom. I'll show you in a bit. And then we can feed it any info we have. It could be an RFP, could be an email, a meeting transcript, or just describing it in one or more sentences. And then the orchestrator will go through 4 different phases, starting with the discovery phase, trying to understand the client's business problem, the users, the data, and the must-have features for the demo. And then we have the design phase, where it will create a very concrete blueprint with CDS entities, seed data, and the floor plan, the screen flow, etc. And on each of those phases, we have a checkpoint where it asks for confirmation for the developer itself. And after that, it builds the prototype, both back and front end, and ending with testing to a clickable demo. And then also it creates an implementation plan for further development and a whole backlog of user stories that can be directly implemented. And so I'll show you in a video. So here we have a prompt, so build an invoice exception handler for the company Dev2Dev. Finance wants to see the incoming invoices that don't match the purchase order, get an AI suggested reason for the mismatch, and approve or escalate with one click or one tap. And so we can copy paste that prompt, and then in Cloud Code we can use the command /showroom and then paste that prompt in. Then it will gather all the information which it has, so you can see it, and then it will ask certain questions. So what are the mismatch types we need to provide in the demo? So we can select those. How does the approval flow work? We can make a decision there as well. And on what landscape the client has SAP running. So after that, it's a bit sped up, but here we see the discovery summary. We can still make changes or say continue. Then we get the floor plan proposal. We can also still make changes, and then the prototype design. And then once we approve this, it'll start the whole development of the demo. And then once it's ready, we can click on it, and then it'll show up fully interactive, proper UI5, and everything working, filters working, and then we can click on one, see a detailed page, see the AI analysis, for example, and then you can approve or escalate. And then we can see a change in as well there. So to show a client this, it's so much more than just a screenshot. And these are some of our other examples: a quotation management app for a bill of materials with statuses, a dashboard for network incidents, which we can report and see with all the graphs and information, and also an invoice exception, which we can see the status of. So a lot of different types of application. And at the end, here we can see the implementation plan it created with all the architecture, the integration layer, the estimates of how many workdays it needs, the technical risks and mitigations, what's still missing, what BTP services it requires, all this information that we can start development from. And also, like I mentioned, the backlog of all the user stories prioritized with all the sizing and all the acceptance criteria. So we can import this direct into Jira or GitLab, whatever we are using. And then we can start development the day after approval, in essence. Okay, so that's a bit how our showroom model works. So it looks like a really working application, and in many ways it is. You can click through it and everything responds, but still it's a facade. So it's like you go to a store and you want to buy a bathroom. It's all set up in the showroom. But to build it in your own home, you still need to correct configuration, the measurements, the plumbing, the electricity. That's exactly here as well what we have to do still on top of what AI has already built. So there's now a mock user instead of a real role, a data model that only handles the demo, a single tenant instead of multi-tenancy, no actual backend connectivity to an S4 HANA system, for example, no pipeline to ship it, no logging, accessibility, translations. That's still the pieces we still need to add to take it to production. So that's why we're, as developers, are still essential even with AI. So it upgrades what we deliver. So we're still essential in thinking through the right architecture, making deliberate security decisions, expanding the test coverage to include all those edge cases that matter for us, and then producing documentation that's actually transferable and readable for another human being. So once we have that prototype ready and approved for further development, then we head over to using our new spec-driven development framework called Flexso, and I'll let Maxime show you.
Thank you. So indeed, like Bram said, okay, we have our showroom model to kickstart an initial project, but of course, like he also said, it's just a facade. But now we want to actually implement this and make it finished and until we have the finished bedroom, so to say. So we have done, while SAP is working on really interesting stuff, while we're waiting on those interesting things SAP is working on, we created a bit of our own framework for AI usage, which is called Flexso, which is indeed spec-driven. Now you might think, okay, spec, it sounds like the really big 30-page files that you have to read through, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean only that. It can also just be in a meeting, the notes, or just a small documentation of an issue. And our goal with those notes is that we can also just make everything clear. So that's why we also say docs over meetings. Let's say, for example, the customer or the end user has a bug and they just say it doesn't work. With that, you don't know anything about what's not working, why is it not working, what did the user try. That's why docs are so important, or at least notes, okay, that he or she clearly explains, okay, I was doing this is what happened, I got this error. With that information, you can do much more than a simple, it doesn't work. And with that, we can, of course, also use the AI as a team member. It's not just a toy that just reads your info and then spits out a bit of code. Oh, this might be useful. No, we really use it as a team member, so in the whole phase of development. And with that approach, we also try to keep our docs in one place, because I think everyone knows that, okay, this information is here in an email, there is in a random Teams message from 5 months ago, this is on SharePoint, this is on GitLab, this is on Jira. Trying to find the correct information, all the nuances for a feature or bug can sometimes be infuriating. And that's why we try to keep our docs in one place, not only for ourselves, but also for the AI to have access to all this information. And with this approach, we not only have less meetings, but we can also prepare the meetings better, so we can first really document from customer side, for example, really document what we want, and then have one final meeting to just discuss the open points, rather than having to go back and forth 10 times, discussing everything that's still open. It makes everyone's life more efficient. And that's why we have one golden rule: documentation matters. Because once you write it once, you can always understand it later on. So with this documentation, the intelligence not only shifts from shared everyone in between, so okay, maybe person A knows this, person B knows this is on SharePoint, this is on GitLab. We try to just keep it in one place now in our new approach. Like I said, also for ourselves, but also for the AI, so that it has all the context. And so to showcase how we use this in our development cycle, I'll just first go briefly over the same 6 stages that every bug or feature goes through. So first we start with an opportunity. So whether that be the customer or the end user logs a bug or expresses that they want a new feature, we have this opportunity. Then of course you want to document this. So whether it be writing out what exactly we want, or what goes wrong, or what the problem is, we try to document all this. Then of course, we implement it, so it gets implemented. Then we review, so whether that be an actual code review or a functional review, if the feature works or the bug is not happening anymore, we try to review on all fronts. Then we, of course, ship it to either dev, test, or production, and then we can actually use it. Now, the first and last 2 steps, you can optimize a bit there with AI, but they're still very much human-driven. But in the middle 3 steps, the document build and review phase, is where it can really accelerate our workflow using AI. So how do we do this? Let's take the example of a new feature. So first we report it, and then we have a brief summary of what we want to implement. Then we really brainstorm about it. So we go back and forth with the AI. It asks questions like, okay, should we do this or this? Should we take this approach, this approach? And at the end of this, we not only have a better summary, but also a full implementation plan in our code. Okay, these files need to be changed, and we need to do this here and there. Then, yeah, of course, we again implement it. And then finally, we also log and test. So we have testing, so unit testing in the code to test the code itself, but also we have a full test plan in our issue to reproduce the issue. So if we look back on the previous diagram, we also see, okay, the report and brainstorm is mainly part of the document phase, and the implement the build, and then the login testing, mainly the review. Now, what does this look like in reality? So let's take a real-life example. We have a small app which lets employees request a leave request. But, okay, the customer, we can only request 1 day at a time now. Yeah, it's a bit annoying. The customer wants to request multiple days at once. So we then start with our reporting phase. So we say, okay, as an employee, I want to be able to request multiple days in one request. So we have a start and an end date rather than 1 day at a time. And so then the AI, okay, it comes up with a brief summary, as we can see here. So it created a GitLab issue now, for example, which says, okay, these are some user stories that we can use to have tested, some acceptance criteria, and then some initial things it touches upon, like, okay, maybe it could be this, but I'm not going in too deep yet. But then the really powerful part comes in our brainstorm phase, because then the AI is really looking at the code and asking questions like, okay, should weekends count, for example, to our total of days? The existing records that we have in this, should they be ignored? Should they be changed to this new? Yeah, it's really important functional questions. And then at the end, we really have our summary is expanded a bit more, but also when we look down, we also have a full implementation plan, not just logically, but also, okay, real files and what it needs to change everywhere. And then we can start our AI implementation. So it goes over all the files, okay, does all the steps. And then at the end, we now, once it refreshes, and of course now it's acting up.
Welcome to the live demo.
Yeah. Should just take 1 second. Okay, but yeah, to briefly recap, we will have the feature implemented and can actually use it and request multiple days at the same time in one request and then approve it. So then I will give the word back to Bram to give a small recap and the next steps.
Alrighty. So we show you now 2 ways where AI supports our way of working, but what can AI still not do? So treat it as an accelerator and not a replacement. So first, expertise stays necessary. So AI generates the code, but a developer with real domain knowledge still is the one who judges whether it's actually right for this customer, this landscape, this problem. So the brainstorm step, we just saw that's human work, you know, answering those questions, thinking about those edge cases, setting priorities, deciding also on what not to build. And third, the more we get AI output means also the more we need to review and to make sure everything is correct, because the more things we have, the more things that potentially can go wrong. And then fourth, security is still something that needs deliberate attention at every step. It needs an explicit moment in the brainstorm, an explicit check in the review, and in testing. So let's recap a bit. So first, SAP is developing all these useful AI tools, and they're available and they're getting regular updates. But the broader point here is that AI also is lowering the threshold for building your own frameworks and your own tools on top of that. And so the showroom model we showed and Flexso, these aren't just things only a big consultancy firm can do, but these are like building blocks that any team can put together with some attention. And so secondly, context is everything. So we said it at the start, and it's still like the most important technical insight. A well-written spec, the right tool, a developer who knows the data model, then AI will really accelerate the whole development cycle. And then third is to stay curious and stay ahead. So the tools are constantly changing, new models, new tools, but we as developers need to build a habit of following this and then folding it into our own workflow to stay ahead. And so we've organized a full day training on Friday 18th of September for both back and front end developers who want to learn all about this and to accelerate their AI workflows. So one thing we didn't demo today was ABAP, and so we stayed on BTP and UI5 mainly, but the Academy here is the right place to go deeper on that side specifically. So developers, architects, technical leads, they're all welcome, and you can register scanning the QR code. Okay, so thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoyed this Dev2Dev. And with that, are there any questions? Okay, first question, what MCP servers do you use? Are they custom made or do you use the ones from SAP itself? Like I personally use the UI5 and the CAP MCPs for development, and if I'm not mistaken, they're from SAP itself. So I don't know about you.
Yeah, I use the same too, but you also have one for Fiori for more UX guidelines, but
True.
it's also from SAP itself.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think general LLMs are already strong enough, and sure, you need to feed it the SAP context, but it's not that you have to plug in 20 MCPs to get something working. It's just a few details here and there.
Okay. I wonder to what extension the final result can or will deviate from the initial result when I start requesting for changes to a delivered requirement.
Not 100% sure what the question is.
Yeah.
But essentially, maybe I'll just go over the implementation. So, okay, we have our plan that we create, for example, with the reporting and brainstorm phase. And okay, it produces a plan, but it will really follow that because it only uses that plan, and okay, the code base as well, of course, to implement that feature. So it will really check and test, okay, are all the user requirements met? Are the acceptance criteria followed? So if you're worried about the difference there, if that's your question, then yeah, it's not big. Okay, maybe some small things here and there, but that's what the functional testing is for, that you also still check yourself, okay, is everything working? Not just the AI with the unit testing.
Yeah, true. For the prototype, why would you use VS Code instead of something like Claude Design? That's a good question, actually, because initially we also tested out Claude Design to make Fiori apps, and the output was something that looked really like UI5 and Fiori, but in essence it was only one HTML file, so all the proper architecture backend, it was still missing, so we couldn't start developing from that HTML. It's good as a reference, and so that's why we switched over to VS Code to really make all the proper files and architectures and folders, so we still have a starting point to start developing from. Yes. Okay, good question. Okay, I think that's I can wrap things up. So thank you, Maxime. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And we hope you learned something and are feeling inspired to make something of your own. Okay.
Maybe as a last side note for the training, okay, we showed the QR code really shortly here, but in the thank you mail for joining the session, it will also, the link will still be in there as well if you're interested. But with that, I think
we can wrap it up.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.